It is a wonderful day for news and conversations. Welcome to the Jaybe Show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you joining me here as usual on the Sunday afternoon. Just to let you guys know, every single Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you guys can tune in to me here on Revolutionary Blackout Network. Also, you can see me on Thursdays at 5 p.m. for the Savvy and JB Show. You can also see me on my own personal channel on the JB Font channel every Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Yes, the time has changed. We did it through democratic means to change it at 3 p.m. But yes, you guys can tune in to see me there as well. If you have not already, go ahead and give a like to the stream. This is going to be a good one, and I cannot wait to get into this. But if you guys want to wait till towards the end, that's fine too. But please make sure to like the stream as well. Also, if you have not already, you can join our mailing list at revolutionaryblackout.substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever we go live, upload clips, or write any articles. So you guys have that there as well. And if you'd like to shoot us an email for any stories or any encouraging words, then you guys can do that at revolutionaryblackout@outlook.com so that you guys can get in contact with us. And we deeply appreciate it. Good to see all of you joining for the stream. We are very grateful. Also, if you have not already, please make sure that you're still subscribed, because the tube, I would like to say, they have been removing some subscribers. So just check to make sure you're still subscribed as well, because some funny stuff has been going on. So we just want to make sure that you haven't had your subscriptions messed with. But with that being said, I want to say hello to everybody, a blanket hello. And while we're at it, as always, whenever I have a guest, I want to be respectful of their time as we get into our conversation. And so what are we going to be talking about? Well, let's get into it. We're going to be talking later in the show. We're going to be talking about a panelist on Morning Joe that said, "We risk revolution." This is going to be something I'm going to be talking about later in the show today, because I feel like that this was a dose of reality that needed to be said in corporate media. Will they listen? Well, we'll talk about it. All right. So we're going to talk about that. I also have a bonus story in relation to this as well and it's going to be a heavy story, but it's going to be about the unhoused. This story came across my eyes, I can say probably about 3 hours ago, and I decided to put it on the show. We're going to be discussing that as well. But first, what we're going to be doing is we'll be speaking with Momodou, and we're going to be talking basically about the issues surrounding his being silenced as an activist, as well as a graduate professor. And I would like to introduce Momodou to the stream. Good to have you right now. You're muted.
There we go. It's an absolute honor and privilege. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really love your show. It's a source of the type of news that I want to hear and need to hear, and many others need to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It means a lot. Momodou, you are a graduate student at Cornell University, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there has been some attention, especially on you from the media, in particular from even the likes of the Young Turks have actually spoke about your story. And also there was an article that actually came out recently, not recently, but a few months ago, out of Rolling Stone that actually talked about your situation. If you can just expound on it a little bit about exactly what happened
Yeah.
to you so that people can get a synopsis of what the story is and why it's so important that people know exactly what's going on?
Yes, and thank you so much for the opportunity. So it's difficult to kind of pick a inflection point to start my story, but I would say ever since October the 7th with the military operation in Israel, there has been a sustained campaign of protest, pro-Palestinian advocacy, calling for divestment, calling from our institutions complicity in the genocide against the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, I guess because I was a known face at the protest, someone that would often speak at the protests, that kind of placed a target on my back, right? Then my initial suspension was actually in April due to the encampments. Then I had like a small backlash. I was reinstated, and then I came back this full semester as a professor, as a teacher, and also a student.
Mm-hmm.
In September, there was a careers fair. A careers fair wherein which people were being recruited to work for various companies, and present there was L3 Harris and Boeing. These are companies that are directly implicated and complicit in the genocide against the Palestinians. A group of protesters went to the fair. There was a little, a confrontation with the police, and then the protesters went inside. And then I was inside for about 5 minutes, and then I left. Upon leaving, a police officer recognized me from the encampment. A black police officer recognized me and then kind of said something and then carried on walking past me. A day or two later, I received an email that I've been suspended and I should come in for a meeting. On 23rd of September, I walked into the meeting and I was told that I'm suspended. I will be de-enrolled promptly. And as an international student, the conditions upon which your visa remains valid is that you must be a full-time student. So basically, effectively telling me I had like 48 hours to leave the country, basically. So that triggered the international outcry. Thousands upon thousands, which I'm truly grateful for, signed the petition. The university then backed down over the due to, I think everyone kind of wrote. Jamal Bowman, Bernie Sanders, all these articles kind of came out in my support. And the support was really overwhelming, actually, because I think I've got to check this, but I think Cornell was effectively going to be amongst the first to have a student deported for pro-Palestinian advocacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, there's been no allegations of violence, right? I've not been violent, but I was deemed, and I was told to my face that I am deemed a threat. I'm deemed a threat to the campus. I'm deemed a threat to the student population when there's been no evidence of me being violent at all.
Yeah.
But actually, for the backlash, I was told that, okay, fine, you can no longer teach, and I'm still banned from campus, but I will be able to keep my visa and still get my degree. So whilst it definitely is a win because I'm still in the country, it does feel bittersweet because, again, you would think that the folks that have been awoken in this time, that still have a heart, honestly, that still have not been affected by the kind of moral apathy that pervades this country, stand up and say, you know what, we don't want our tuition fees, we don't want the institutions in which we are part of to be complicit in a brutal genocide, right? That has been going on for 15, 16 months now, right? So, but yeah, that's the point. That's the way of the land. And my case isn't an anomaly. I guess being an international student and being amongst the first, it got it kind of hit the media in the way it did. But there's many other instances in where we're seeing campuses repress pro-Palestinian speech in some of the most brutal ways. Like we saw sweeps, we've seen faculty being pummeled to the ground, people being denied tenure, right? So that's what basically happened to me.
Wow, that's harrowing, especially in regards to you're an international student coming to the United States in order to finish your education, and then you're faced with a moral decision, especially in regards to what's going on, genocide in Gaza, and you express the First Amendment rights that's afforded to us. And in doing so, you're now demonized and threatened to be deported back to the UK because of you expressing your First Amendment rights. This this sounds similar to what happens to a lot of people who are immigrants. We had the whole conversation about the H-1B visas. If they spoke out against the company, then the visas would get cut off and then they get deported back. You being a student, being of the F1 visa program, if you speak out, then you get deported back to the UK just for speaking out against what the nation is doing, which in reality, it's like, okay, if they're, putting us in jail and if they're deporting you, then that means that they just really don't want any type of dissent from the empire.
Yep.
And, sorry, go ahead.
No, but then you mentioned the H1B1 and you mentioned the F1. What we're realizing is these are structured by design in this way. They're structured in ways that to send a chilling message to people who come to this country, don't even think about having an opinion. Don't even think about taking a moral stance, right? Because you are in such a, and again, the university actually targeted people who are in precarious situations. Because they wanted to make an example out of me and send a message to all other students. Don't you even dare think about protesting because you will also be in jeopardy. And it had that effect on this campus. I had so many international students saw what I went through and said, I can't protest anymore. Like it had the intended effect, right? So I think fundamentally, but I think when you see what's happening in Gaza, I don't know how anyone cannot be moved and incensed and express righteous indignation when we're seeing a genocide taking place. I never thought we would see a live streaming of a genocide with such graphic images. And it's not, and again, the image of that is being painted around the students, so from far as going that these people are pro-terrorists, for example, to people saying that, these people are just like uppity kids who have nothing better to do. When really and truly, these kids should be celebrated. And it's so frustrating that these liberals, these quote-unquote liberal institutions, will be the first to celebrate anti-apartheid movement, will be the first to celebrate what happened in Vietnam. But you dare raise up the present-day issues. No. That's when they'll clamp down hard on you. But in 50 years' time, they'll say, oh, do you know what our students did at this university? They took a moral stance. Right, so it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating, but I'm not deterred, and I haven't been. It's considerable adjustments to my life, but I don't regret anything.
Yeah, it's quite the conundrum because, as for anybody who is not visually impaired, we're both Black, so I keep thinking about apartheid in South Africa. And one of the things that was brilliantly asked by my comrade Nick here on RBN last week, we had on Congressman Rokana, and he actually spoke about boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and how it was effective to really, take away the apartheid in South Africa, to end it, right? And yet, if we try to apply that same thing to the apartheid that's happening, and for anybody who, may not understand what apartheid is, just think about Jim Crow, but just in another country. But anytime, we talk about apartheid that's happening within, occupied Palestine, especially in places like the West Bank, then we're told, well, that's not really apartheid. But then you see the actual images on the ground. And for anybody who is watching, I recommend that you look up the documentary by Abby Martin called Gaza Fights for Freedom. If you guys have not watched that documentary, I highly recommend that you do, because you will see the apartheid in real time. And you'll see the peaceful means that they have done in order to try to do that march of return. And yet they were violently resisted against by the occupying state of Israel for trying to peacefully get their homes back. But with that being said, what do you say to the people who tell you, and this may even be our own people, keep your head down, just do the work, and don't ruffle any feathers. You can do that after you get your degree, after you get your accolades, after you get into your profession? What do you say to people who say things like that?
To quote scripture, what is it? What does a man gain to what does he to profit from the world but lose himself, right? Like, I don't understand. I will never, ever, and I always say this, right? Again, when I was going through it, it was intense, right? But I thought to myself, if I live to see my 70s and 80s, there will never come a time where I think to myself, I think I went too hard for Palestine, or I think I did too much for Palestine. Because if anything, I'm actually quite ashamed that we've been doing all of this protesting and the genocide continues unabated. I don't think we've done nearly much as enough, right? Those of us living in the global north, we exist in structures that our material well-being is connected to certain forms of protest, meaning that certain forms of protest are going to be tolerable, whilst others won't be. So for me, once again, I don't have any regrets. I think to myself, I would much rather be in a situation where I can lay my head at night and said, you know what, I tried as much as I could, than saying to myself, oh, I was scared for what? Like, okay, I love my study. I'm studying Africana studies. It's the first Africana studies program in the United States. I'm in Black studies. I study West Africa. I study Pan-Africanism. But the reason what compelled me to even study in the first place is a concern with my people, is a concern with Africa, is a concern with Africans around the world. I don't just mean continental Africans, but everyone of African descent. Seeing Black people and the condition of Black people in this country is what compelled me to study, because I wanted to understand the world in such a way, first and foremost, to understand why the world is the way it is. And secondly, what can we do to change that, right? So my studies, so putting my head down for me is a bit counterproductive. It doesn't make sense to me because it's incommensurate, because putting your head down then for me makes my studies worthless then.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as your status right now, and I just want to, you may have mentioned it in the beginning, but as far as your status right now, are you still able to finish your studies, or have they taken any more further action against you?
No, so as things stand now, I'm allowed to continue my studies. I have my visa. I'm still banned from campus. And that's how things are. Like I can work from home, I can work from off-campus libraries and just get my work in. So I'm definitely like trying to finish quick, because I don't like the fact that they can have this over me still. But yeah, I mean, I'm in my third year. Hopefully I'll finish within 2 more years.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you'll be able to get to finish this. I'll be honest with you, and I praise the work that you're doing. My thing is that if you can get out of this country,
I agree with you. Believe me, I'm trying. We're trying.
And the thing is like, I'm not saying that because I want you to go, because you're an important voice, especially somebody who's international, who's been outside of the country. And this is one of the benefits of people who are able to travel. If you can travel, please make sure to do so.
Yeah.
But you're in a sense, from the outside looking in, you're still within an empire, but you're not within the main part of the empire, right? And so I say that as someone who is trying to do the work of changing the world into a more egalitarian, equal, and equitable world, that it's like, just survive, because they will try to break you down, as much as possible.
As well, like, I mean, just to add, people don't realize that the university put such a target on my back. When I traveled in the summer and came back, I was stopped for 3 hours at the airport, right? I was interrogated. They took my phone. They said to me, what do you think of certain resistance groups? They questioned me for in detail. And by the end of the questioning, and people don't even believe me, but I have no reason to lie. But by the end of the questioning, they said to me, oh, okay, welcome to the US. It's at JFK. And he said to me, the border agent, and I quote, we don't get people as well-traveled and educated, often coming through here, would you be interested in talking to our officers about what you're hearing on the ground? Right? Tried to recruit me like so brazenly. And I said, oh, okay, I'll think about it. Right? Then they escorted me to get my bags, which they had destroyed. Like they destroyed my zip, my clothes were all messed up. Then I asked the officer, am I going to get stopped every single time I come to the United States? And he said to me, not necessarily, but if you agree to speak to us, things will run smoothly for you. Right? So
It's very good, feel like.
Yeah, it really is. It was unbelievable because you watch Judas and the Black Messiah, you watch all these like ways in which counterinsurgency or COINTELPRO has recruited people. I never thought it would just be so like brazen to just outright ask you.
Yeah. Yeah, this country is very brazen in their lack of humanity when it comes to liberatory practices, but that's how it started. That's how it began. Yeah. With that being said, as far as what's going on in Gaza, we continue to keep speaking out. Of course. I just want to thank you for being as vocal as you have been. There have been many students, especially American students, who have also spoken out against what has been happening. And I hope to see more voices speak out, especially in regards to other different causes as well. But this is a really big one. For the last, where are we at? 14 months since October 7th?
Yeah,
15?
Almost 15 now, right?
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, just exactly. And again, it's like, what else needs to be done, right? But I guess the only kind of solace I find in this moment is knowing that I don't think we can ever go back. I think the world, at least the global south and significant parts of the global north, have been exposed to the reality of Zionism.
Yeah,
we've seen the true face of Zionism. What the Palestinians have gone through for almost 100 years, if not more, we are now seeing that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. As much as we've seen over the last 14, almost 15 months, it's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to purse my words very carefully here. It's sort of poetic as to what is going on right now within our country. I'm going to share this with you. This was from Danny Haifong. He said, on the left, Los Angeles, California. On the right, Gaza. One born of a U.S. empire with no regard for the people it claims to represent. The other born of U.S. empire that supports Israel's genocidal expansion at any cost of Palestinian life. Two disasters, one imperial machinery of destruction. And so it brings me no pleasure to juxtapose either of these, because I don't want to see any suffering happening to either.
Of course.
And it's precisely that I look at a lot of the people who support what Israel is doing, especially in towns like Palisades, and in these more affluent areas within California near Los Angeles. And I say, you sit here and you want sympathy for the house or multiple homes that you own due to the affluent life you've lived. And yet you will demonize and occupy people for resisting oppression.
Yep.
And then they suffer the same thing. And this is something that I have, wrestled with, because some people are applauding this fire that's happening. I don't think that's necessarily the right approach, because there's also sweeping in people who have not contributed to this at all, who are suffering, particularly people who are homeless, people who are working class, people who may even be anti-Zionist, but they're celebrities.
Yeah.
So, I don't applaud anything like this. But at the same time, I want to say to people who have shamed people who are fighting against genocide, I say shame on you. And it's ironic how they are pushing for sympathy in regards to them, people like James Woods, Jamie Lee Curtis, and yet you don't have that same sympathy for the people who are living in tents, and their refugee camps get burned to the ground.
The dehumanization of like Muslims, Arabs in contemporary discourse is frightening, right? And we've seen the legacies of dehumanization in this country, because this country justifies itself through dehumanizing others, right? In the name of security, in the name of empire, in the name of imperialism, this country consistently from its foundations has relied on the dehumanization of the indigenous, of the enslaved Africans. And another instantiation of that today is of Muslims and Arabs, right? And we continue, and so it's not, again, this is not new for the history of America, but it's just another instantiation of that, right? We see the similar terms, the way in which Black men have been described. We see Palestinian men being described as well, right? These are the parallels that we constantly see, and again, historically, we have sides of the oppressor and the oppressed, and those who aid the oppressor, because again, these same people, as you said, James Wood, people constantly bring up this tweet where he said, kill them all. Yeah. Right? He's about killing them all, but he wants people to have sympathy for him losing his house. And again, I'm with you. I will never applaud what's happening in LA, because working class people are affected. Black and brown people are affected, right? I know a lot of the fires in affluent areas, but also incarcerated youth are now being paid $3.50 to risk their lives with no break to put out these fires, right? Of color as well. So I would never be someone that, and again, I fear a dead heart. Like I fear what James Baldwin said, the moral apathy. I would never want my heart to be such a place where I'm cold and indifferent to suffering, right? But what I can't take is the hypocrisy. And double standards. Right? I can't take that. I can't accept that. And I think that should be called out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of a segue. It's a segue that I don't take pleasure in, but I want to switch gears. Can we talk about Burkina Faso for a second? I feel like this next part is maybe because I'm in the West and I see what the West does, I don't get the full picture. But I feel like Captain Ibrahim Traore is making a mistake. And I'm going to share with you this tweet. This is from one of the friends to the channel, Slank. He's an artist. He shared this. It says the government of Burkina Faso already signed a new IMF agreement for millions of unsustainable loans. And this is a screenshot from one of the pages, and I have both pages opened up already. It says out of Washington, D.C., it says an International Monetary Fund team led by Martin Schindler, mission chief of Burkina Faso, held meetings in Ouagadougou during September. I'm sorry?
No, Ouagadougou, yeah.
Ouagadougou. Yeah, during September 30th to October 9th, and in Washington during the 2024 IMF World Bank annual meetings to discuss the macroeconomic policies in the context of the second review of the 4-year program supported by the Extended Credit Facility arrangement, an arrangement that was approved by the IMF Executive Board on September 21st of 2023 for a total amount of SDR 228.76 million, or about $302 million US. At the conclusion of the discussions, Mr. Schindler issued the following statement. It says, I am pleased to announce that the Burkinabe authorities and the IMF staff have reached a staff level agreement on the economic financial policies that could support the approval of a second review of the program under the ECF arrangement. The conclusion of this review by the IMF Executive Board will enable the disbursement of about 32 million US dollars, bringing the total IMF financial support disbursed under the arrangement to about 96 million US dollars. The meeting of the IMF Executive Board is tentatively scheduled for December 2024. My question is, given the reputation of entities like the IMF and the World Bank, do you think that this is a mistake by the government of Burkina Faso? I say this because they led a coup in order to wrestle Burkina Faso out of the hands of the West. But it feels like they're going back into the hands of the West now. What is your thoughts?
I appreciate the question. I would say, first and foremost, I'm going to kind of hold off pronouncing any conclusive judgment, because I think what history has taught me is that revolutions are often a contradictory process, right? Often revolutionaries are often contradictory in the nature in their process, right? And I do know from, if you think of like, let's take Nkrumah and let's take Sekou Touré as good examples, who were both committed Pan-Africanists. When Sekou Touré in 57 declared, you know, we'd rather be slaves and have our sovereignty and independence than be like, we'd rather be free and independent than slaves in riches, right? That was a great cost to Guinea at the time, to the point where the French removed like wiring, telephone wiring. The French removed like all some forms of electricity. Like again, the French went and destroyed that country, right? I would say I would prefer to, whilst of course the IMF is never to be trusted. The IMF never acts within its interests. It acts within the interests of US imperialism, right? You situate a country, or you constrain a country in certain ways in order to accumulate better, and could accumulate surplus from these countries and siphon it off to the US. I understand that. But I do also understand that given that this is a country that just recently had a revolutionary process, it's not as just easier just to pull the plug and straight away say, okay, I'm leaving every financial institution without taking a massive backlash to your people. I think this is the question that we have to wrestle with and say, okay, whilst you should be cautious, I'm sure, again, I'm given the rhetoric coming from Ibrahim Traore, I would be surprised if these are questions that he's not aware of. Right. Also, recently, I don't know if he saw that recently had a massive shipment from the Chinese. He's been moving closer to China and Russia. He even voted with them recently on certain things. And, you know, he's been taught, he went to Russia as well. So I think there is definitely a political and ideological direction in the country. How that comes about materially, I think we have to kind of hold off making conclusive judgments. Of course, be critical. Of course, remain critical, but I would hold off making a conclusive judgment to say, oh, he's betraying revolution, or this isn't real Pan-Africanism, or this is a massive mistake. Because again, I don't know what I need to understand specifically. What are the specific dealings and investments and nature of the relationship with the IMF and Burkina Faso now, and how can they begin to move away from that as opposed to just pulling the plug straight away. So I do, and again, I say that as someone who my PhD, for context, is actually sovereignty. So I work in sovereignty and political economy, and I focus on Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. And when I read these people's work, there was a time people accused Nkrumah of not being a real Pan-Africanist, right? Of not being a real Marxist, for example. They said that because he was thinking, okay, when we think of Africa, we've got to think of Burkina Faso. It's a landlocked country, first and foremost. Yeah. When you're in a landlocked country, what does Africa need right now to develop its productive forces? It needs technology. It needs to be able to, right now, a lot of African states, because the way in which Berlin Conference and later forms of neocolonialism, our economies in West Africa and the continent in general have been carved out in specific ways to serve imperialism. That's why certain countries in Africa only produce one good, for example, only allowed to produce one good, for example. So the momentous task upon these leaders right now to develop your productive force, to raise the standard of living, is obviously one that's very difficult. They need to raise funds, they need to raise, etc. Likewise, Nkrumah was, again, when Nkrumah looked for foreign direct investment, people critiqued him a lot, but he was saying that we have a momentous task upon us where colonialism hindered the development of our economies. We need to break out of that. So this is just a long answer to say, whilst we remain critical, and whilst the IMF, of course, are the devils themselves, I'm very much going to hold off a conclusive judgment until I see. But I'd love to hear what you think.
If I'm not in Burkina Faso, so I cannot necessarily say exactly what the needs of the people are, and that's not up for me to determine. Mm-hmm. It's just somebody who knows the empire as somebody who is being trampled on by the empire from the inside. If I were in front of Captain Traore right now, I would say, sir, I would beg you to please reconsider. Mm-hmm. And I would ask him, have you met with Xi to see if there's some type of arrangement that you can work out with them in order to be able to get your resources from, the East or any other nations outside the Western powers, because I do not trust any Western institution as far as I can throw them. Yeah. The IMF, the World Bank, these institutions are known for putting an albatross around the neck of the people when it comes to these loans, and then if they move in a way that these nations don't like, then the sanctions like that. Yeah. And so Burkina Faso is rich with resources. So it's not like you don't have anything. You have the resources. It's just you need the liquidity in order to be able to, help your country develop. So my question would be to Captain Traore, not why. Hang on. I want to word this carefully. Have you went to China? Mm-hmm. And if you have, what was the reason why? Was there any type of deal that just didn't make it feasible for your people going to China, and that you had to go to the World Bank? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, to the IMF. That's kind of what my question is, because he knows that the West, for them, it's always a catch, right? There's devils in the details when it comes to the West. Mm-hmm. That's one of my questions would be to him. Yeah.
I think that's a fair question. At the same time, I think, I just always understand, revolution oftentimes is a contradictory process, given the ways in which these economies are tied up to Western, our economies have been produced in such a way in West Africa that they are tied up to a lot of Western institutions. I just don't know how simple it is to break away in the immediate without causing so much damage to you. I just don't know, because I see it happen time and time again in West Africa historically, right? But again, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's my hatred of U.S. imperialism is well documented, and I'm very much aware of these institutions. So I guess I think I share your I hear your concern. I definitely understand it and appreciate it. I think I will just hold off judgment. I do know that the process of state building and nation building is, a task that it's a momentous task that, and it's very difficult in a global capitalist world.
Yeah, I'm trying to prevent myself from being this paternalistic Westerner that says you should be doing this. It's like we listen and we don't judge. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I'm kind of trying to be like that, but I'm just like, I'll give you an example. I have a friend, she, wanted to be a makeup artist, right? And she's doing her makeup in front of me. We're not FaceTiming, but the Android version. And so we're video chatting, and she's showing me, doing her makeup, and it's looking weird. And she's like, James, trust the process. And I'm just like, okay, I gotta trust the process. And so part of me is like, the captain may be saying, trust the process. It may look bad on his face, but just trust it. But there's another part of me that's going, could this be a big mistake? Because I really want to see Burkina Faso get back to where, Sankara, or the trajectory that Sankara had it going. And so that's my only thing. But I still do not want to be the paternalistic Westerner that tells people in their sovereign country what to do. And so, it kind of feels like a conundrum that I'm in right now. And that's the part about being in the West that I hate. It's like, if I see somebody making a mistake, it's like, do I vocalize it, or do I seem like some arrogant Westerner trying to tell them what to do, and I don't want to do that?
I think the concern is well founded. Because again, you should always be vigilant. History has taught us you should always be vigilant of capital. Always be vigilant of capital. I think it's well founded. I'm yet to speak to like comrades on the ground. I'm yet to see what Traore is saying. But I guess my point of call before making judgment or even having further opinion, it'll be upon me to do a fact-finding mission. So I'm definitely like, I've been thinking about this anyway, but I'm going to take more proactive stance to speak to my comrades in Burkina and see what they're saying about this move, right? Yeah. Let me see, what do they say? What are the folks who are organizing on the ground, the Marxists, the socialists, what are they saying about this move on the ground, and how do they understand it? And then if there's any text of Traore addressing it, I think these are the things I would be interested in looking into.
Yeah. And also I'm saying this because it feels like a bit of a reversal. This was about a month or two before that, as Ibrahim Traore, president of Burkina Faso, turned down an IMF and World Bank financial assistance. He said Africa does need the World Bank, IMF, Europe, or America. We Africans have all what it takes to develop our economy countries without any foreign debt and loan to sustain us. We cannot continue to be enslaved using debts and loans. And so I don't know what the if it's a seeming reversal. I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but at the same time, it's like part of me is saying, maybe this could just be, a trust the process moment. I don't know, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I was just like, Captain, what are you doing?
I think thus far, definitely the moves have been positive, and I think two things I really appreciate. I've seen the moves have been positive in like the Alliance of Society and State, the conference in Niger, the inviting of all the Marxists and communists, and also the reception that Traore is having in the continent. It signals a shift. When he went to Ghana, he was, besides the president, he was the most celebrated person. Of all the world leaders in Africa, he was one of the most celebrated, which signals that the people in Africa are done with this kind of Western domination. So I think, and if anything, Traore, to keep his position, he needs to deliver on the mandate that he will at least deliver on the kind of ideological bent that he has pushed the country towards, which is anti-IMF, anti-Western loans, and a sovereign, first and foremost, Burkina Faso, and by extension, sovereign Africa and the region as well. So I think that's. I'm sure, again, we can talk all day, but I'm sure he knows these things, right? He definitely knows these things. I'm sure he's aware. So I'll be interested to see what he's saying about these things as well.
Yeah. So I want to share this as well. Now I would like to switch gears a little bit. While we're talking about resources. So Donald Trump, he's been in the news quite a bit. Greenland, he is eyeing Greenland, and a lot of us were, because there was this whole talk about, and this was actually a great conversation between Nick, my RB comrade, and Nico House, friend to the channel, about Greenland. And when it comes to, when you think about it, it's really about natural resources that we found out. And I just want to get your thoughts about this, but I want to share Trump's vice president-elect, J.D. Vance, actually speaking on it as well. Let's just hear this, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Of securing Greenland, I think there actually is a real opportunity here for us to take leadership to protect America's security, to ensure that those incredible natural resources are developed. And that's what Donald Trump is good at. He's good at making deals, and I think there's a deal to be made in Greenland. Of securing Greenland, I think there actually is a real opportunity here for us to take leadership to protect America's security, to ensure that those incredible natural resources are developed. And that's what Donald Trump is good at. He's good at making deals, and I think there's a deal to be made in Greenland.
So we heard it twice.
Mm-hmm.
He said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Your thoughts? just
Trump. I appreciate that question. Trump just makes explicit what the Democrats do implicitly. There is a through line directly, and I can see this from Obama, Trump, Biden, and Obama, because Trump is a businessman, right? Not a very good one, but he's a businessman. He's looking at the numbers and he's realizing that America is cooked. He's realizing that there's the production doesn't exist in this country anymore, right? China's beating them on almost every industry, right? Right now, the U.S. economy functions as a rentier economy, meaning that it accumulates and does not reinvest it into productive capacity because it doesn't exist in this country. The only reason why the U.S. is not collapsed is because it has dollar hegemony, right? It can always print the dollar. Financial institutions around the world work in the dollar. It can sanction countries, right? You run the numbers, and anyone can tell you that this country is headed towards systematic collapse. Yeah. So how do you now reverse that, right? You now begin, he's talking about Canada, 51 states. He's talking about Panama. He's talking about Greenland. He's talking about even Palestine is important and Syria is important in this equation. You want to be able to control choke points. What does he say about Greenland? He's like, oh, look at all the Chinese and Russian ships, right? Why? Because he wants to be able to control choke points. When you control choke points, you then have the ability to control price setting. You can impose prices on countries like China and Russia and other countries that use these regions and ports as well. So again, we always know that the US is, the deals are not done in the interest of anyone but the US. But fundamentally, it's thinking, okay, if we don't act in the way we do, if imperialism does not, try on by its last kind of breath to kind of hold on, this country is headed towards systematic collapse. So I think when you understand that and you understand how the way in which imperialism accumulates, Trump makes sense. All this begins to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. This is just, and one of the things I appreciate was one of the things that was spoken about between Nico House and Nick Cruz. They said that this is really globalism, which a lot of the right tends to use that language of globalism. Really, it's just a word of semantics, which for people like you and me is just really just capitalism and imperialism. It shows that they decried globalism in the past.
Yeah. But
now they're cheering on globalism now. In reality, you see the hypocrisy. And I say this is hypocrisy from both parties, because if a Democrat were proposing this, the Democratic Party would also cheer on this as well and saying, well, we're just welcoming more people into the fold. See, we're welcoming Greenland into the fold. This is really just hypocrisy by any other name, in my opinion. And on top of it, one of the questions I was asked by Savvy Savs, another comrade here on RBN, was that are we going to give them free healthcare if we were to take it for Greenland?
I mean, they can't give it to their own citizens, so why would they give it to Greenland?
If we're going to allow them to have free healthcare for what they're accustomed to,
yeah.
If Greenland becomes a 51st state, this is what's going to be bad on them. Because if Greenland becomes a 51st state and they continue to have universal health care, it's going to be bad on either side. If they continue to have universal health care, everybody in the other 50 states are going to go, wait a minute, they can have free universal health care, but we can't. And that's going to put a little seed into our brain and like, well, they can have it, we can't. And then another thing is if they take away the universal health care that people in Greenland are accustomed to, now you have a revolt against the United States from people in Greenland because you took away one of the very things that makes them such an advanced society, which is their universal health care. So then now you're going to have more of a conundrum on your hands. You open up a can of worms because now you're taking something away that they actually have been accustomed to for decades.
Yep.
So the United States doing this is damned if you do and damned if you don't. If they continue to do this imperialist action of trying to take over Greenland.
Mm-hmm. But exactly that, right? Damned if you do and damned if you don't isn't just this action, but it's capitalism in itself in this moment. Capitalism has no more answers. They've exhausted every single possibility in terms of holding on. And that's when we say, we're accustomed to capitalist crisis, but right now, the way in which imperialism and capitalism is working in the United States, it has no more solutions for its crisis. And that's why you're hearing the lashing out. You're hearing the constant drive for war because, as Samira Min will tell you, US imperialism walks on two legs. It walks on the economic and the military. No one's doubting the military strength of the United States, but its economy is basically done out here. it's finished. And yes, it has a military, but for how long is that sustainable? When has the last time the United States has won a war? It can destroy a country, but when has it actually won a war on the ground? It thought it would isolate Russia and Putin by sanctions, but Putin has a wartime economy, right? The United States doesn't have that. And it's almost scary because when you run the numbers, you know that this is a flailing empire. Now the only question becomes, will the United States actually concede and allow for multipolarity in this world in which people are equal and your attachment to a state does not determine your sanctity or worth or dignity, but rather your status as a human being does? Or will it just blow the whole world up and take it to nuclear war? And still we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah. I'll take one more.
Okay. So I wanted to go to this as well. So as of recently, Venezuela has just inaugurated for the third term Nicolas Maduro. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on Maduro being inaugurated and your expectations for his third term. But before we get to that, I just want to share this report and then we'll get into this conversation.
Swearing in for a third consecutive term, Nicolas Maduro lashed out at critics at home and abroad who say there's credible evidence that he stole last July's presidential elections.
Say what you want, do what you must, but this constitutional investiture could not be stopped and is a great victory for democracy in Venezuela.
At issue is precisely the legitimacy of his election, which the opposition claims to have won by a landslide. Maduro's refusal to present tally sheets to prove that he won, as the law demands, unleashed an uproar in the region and beyond. Half a dozen countries, including the United States, have formally recognized exiled opposition candidate Edmundo González as Venezuela's rightful president. Washington offered $25 million for information leading to his arrest and conviction on charges of alleged narco-terrorism.
Let's stop there for a second. You literally are trying to put a wanted poster for Nicolas Maduro?
I'm the president of a sovereign nation.
For a president of a sovereign nation? Like, hold on. My question is, why aren't they doing this for Netanyahu, who is actually
opposite for Netanyahu, because the Congress is trying to sanction the ICC for issuing arrest warrants for Netanyahu and other Israeli defense ministers, right? again, the ICC has issued an indictment for wars against humanity, right? For genocide, and the Congress's response is, they said this in private, which we see this expressed openly. The ICC isn't set for people who white or who are non-black, because again, they were more than happy to march several African leaders to the ICC, but they will sanction these people. But yeah, it's incredible. Like a 25 million bounty on a president of a sovereign nation.
It's wild in his face. Let's continue. I just want to get. Sometimes I look at Al Jazeera, I'm just like, y'all be saying some shady shit.
Yeah, facts.
Let's continue.
Charges of alleged narco-terrorism. The same applies to his closest aides. The EU has also slapped sanctions on Venezuelan officials accused of human rights violations. And, as never before, Maduro is isolated in his own region. This is where Venezuela's embassy in Santiago, Chile, used to operate until after the elections, when both countries virtually severed ties. In fact, all but two Latin American countries, Nicaragua and Cuba, have either cut their diplomatic relations altogether or distanced themselves from Maduro. However, Venezuela's government has other, more powerful allies. Russia and China sent top-tier leaders of the Duma and the People's Congress to the inauguration to underscore their support, as well as Iran, India, and OPEC. Meanwhile, Edmundo González failed to make good on his vow to return to Venezuela to claim the presidential sash in the face of certain arrest.
Edmundo vendrá a Venezuela a jurar.
Edmundo will come to Venezuela to be sworn in as constitutional president of Venezuela at the right time when the conditions are right.
Tensions remain very high, as evidenced by...
I'm sorry.
Nah, it's laughable, right? It really is.
Wait. I'm sorry, but this lady is delusional. Hang on. Wait a minute. Let's go back on that just for a second.
Edmundo will come to Venezuela to be sworn in as constitutional president of Venezuela at the right time when the conditions are right.
The conditions are right, meaning when the US is able to install. But again, we saw what happened. Right? Guaido claimed victory.
You know what she sounds like?
Where is Guaido today?
You know what she sounds like, though? Oh, well, President Trump this is back in 2020. Trump's going to still be president. He's going to come in. It's not going to be Biden, even though Biden won. I'm just looking at him like, are you okay?
It's insane, right? It's insane. I mean, the thing is, for me, I don't take any analysis or any analyst seriously when it comes to Venezuela, unless you're going to center the sanctions, right? When we often say U.S. imperialism is the primary contradiction. We're saying that you have to. Yes, I'm sure there's issues. Every country has issues. Every country is repressive in certain ways. But if you do not hold the primacy of sanctions in Venezuela, and the reason that there's an over-reliance on oil, which Chavez recognized, and again, they struggle to diversify the economy is there, I don't take anything else seriously, because again, that is the reason why Venezuela is the way it is now. And we can look at what happened under Chavez and the ways in which he was able to overcome so many of the sanctions, right? But again, I had a fortunate experience of listening directly to the foreign minister of Venezuela, who said that, we're still on the path to socialism. We're still on the path of building socialism. We just have to become more ingenious in the ways in which we do it because of the sanctions as well. So again, it's laughable what's happening. It's scary, but again, all of this don't, for me, indicate a sign of strength, but rather a sign of weakness and a flailing empire.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because they said that there's a strained relationship with Cuba, right? And the funny part is just a quick Google search, and here's a report says that President Diaz-Canel, which is the president of Cuba, leaves for Cuba after attending Maduro's inauguration. That was 2 days ago. Meaning, if their relationship is so strained then why would Miguel Diaz-Canel attend Nicolas Maduro's inauguration?
Mm-hmm.
Like, see, this is why sometimes I look at Al Jazeera. I'm like,
It's same thing though in Putin, right? It made me laugh. Putin is isolated, but then in the BRICS conference in Kazan, Antonio Guterres was there. The Secretary General of the United Nations was there. How is that isolated?
Yeah.
So
What?
again,
What are you guys talking about?
And when they mean isolated, they mean the Western world. Let's just understand that. They mean the Western world. Okay, fine. The Western world is what? Something like 40-something countries. 2/3 of the world exists outside of the West. So, and again, if anything, you would rather be isolated from your enemies and then continue to make development plans with your friends and allies who won't turn against you and who won't try and overthrow you or sanction you.
Yeah. It's hilarious on his face how they will, say, these things, and yet it's not true. Wow. So yeah, as far as what's happening around the world, especially and how it affects us, not here on the ground. I'm looking forward to seeing more. I'm looking forward to see more anti-imperialist elements that are coming out. One of the things I'm actually hoping for, I would love to see, and going back on Burkina Faso, is I would love to see them join BRICS. Mm-hmm. BRICS doesn't have a currency yet, but I'm hoping that comes soon so that, Captain Ibrahim Traoré and the government in Burkina Faso, they are able to just leave the West and the dustbin of history and continue on to develop themselves outside of Western hegemony. Because I'm a little bit more hypersensitive to what the African countries are doing, because I remember what they did to Gaddafi. Mm-hmm. And I'm still learning, but brushing up on what they did to Nkrumah and Sankara. Yep. And so I want to see them have their own sovereignty and self-determination.
Absolutely.
And I'm just looking forward to that. And hopefully more of these Western, not Western, but these nations in the global South, they're able to join more of a democratized unipolar world, in like what BRICS is doing. I'm just hoping that they do.
Yeah.
Because because ultimately what happens there is going to affect us.
Absolutely.
But it may, let me ask you this one more question. If, for instance, right now we know that BRICS has a larger GDP, combined GDP than the G7, right? Do you think that the bigger that BRICS gets, the more harm will come to us? And if so, is this more of a, you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, and we should brace ourselves for impact? Like, I think you kind of understand what I'm trying to say.
And I think fundamentally, those of us who organize within the global North have to reckon with this contradiction, right? The contradiction of how do you improve, which is absolutely of importance, the material conditions of Black folk and those people of color who are suffering in this country, whilst also recognizing that the empire in decline will affect everyone here, but also be a net positive, a material positive for folks in the global South. I don't particularly have an answer, but I do reckon with that contradiction a lot. And I think that's something that anti-imperialists in this country should constantly be thinking about and theorizing about as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is why mutual aid and building dual power is so important, because I see the storm on the horizon, and it's not a storm for them, but it's a storm for us because of what this nation has done to put us in this position. I kind of think about it like I think about it like Zionists that have moved to occupy Palestine,
Mhm.
and then they put themselves in harm's way by being occupiers. And now it's like, now you are now the occupier, and then something happens to you. It's like, well, you put your people in harm's way.
Mhm.
I feel like that's what the West has done to us. They put us in harm's way, when in reality they should have collaborated with these countries instead of, did what they did as far as sanctions and suppressing and blockades. Because now they're coming together, and now they're going to basically wipe us away economically. And it's like you fucked around and you found out. You know what I'm saying? That's what it feels like.
I think it's kind of final conclusion fundamentally, and people know this already, but stay tapped in, join a revolutionary organization, brace for impact, and stay ready for what is to come ready. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on. Can you let people know where they can find you and what you have coming up in the near future?
Yep, absolutely. Momodou Taal, just my name, on Twitter. I also have my book going to print, finally, The Malcolm Effect Revisited, coming out soon. And yeah, you can catch me on the Malcolm Effect podcast as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much for joining me. Momodou, is so pleasure to have you. And please don't be a stranger. We'll have you back on soon in the near future.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Thank you so very much for tuning in to that conversation. If you guys have not already, please make sure to go ahead and give a like. Appreciate it very much. This was a great conversation. I hope that we were able to cover a lot of ground that you were probably thinking about. So let's go into the chat really quick. Let me check on the Rockfin side. We're good on Rockfin. I'm going to check on the Rumble side to see if we have any Rumble rants to see about that. Oh, this is interesting. I have never seen that before. Let me, I have never seen this before, but let me share this really quick. On the Rumble side. What is this? It says Boost Rumble Boost has rated the stream. I have never seen that before, but that's pretty cool. I don't know. I see a ship through traverse waters. Thank you very much. You guys rated the stream. That's pretty awesome. All right. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Let's go into the regular chat. We're going to say our salutations, our hellos, as well as any responses to what's going on with that conversation. Zoya says, please check to make sure you're subscribed. Yes, if you have not already, please make sure to check that you are subscribed to RBN. Our subscribers, some of you guys have been unsubscribed and you guys don't even know. So please check to make sure that you're still subscribed, okay? So we have Robbie Burns coming in saying, hey, JB, good to see you. Robbie, we have DJ Leader saying, Super Sunday, JB and RBN fam. Are you sipping the tea or spilling it today? I think we're going to be doing a little bit of both today. All right, we have Leroy coming in saying, good day, family. Good to see you, Leroy. My brother from another mother. Good to see you. We have Terry coming in saying, greetings, JB and comrades. Good to see you, Terry. Dabby Dab says that, fam, don't forget to show that like button some love. Yes, spread it like some warm peanut butter. Have you ever left peanut butter in the car on a warm day and then you take it into the house, but you open it up immediately and then you scoop it out and it's really smooth and it comes out creamy? Oh God, that's the best peanut butter ever. I like crunchy peanut butter though. I'm a very big crunchy peanut butter fan. That's the kind of dude I am. Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, everyone. Hey, JB. Good to see you, Jacqueline. We have Chris coming in saying, hello, 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 Chris. All right. Love, Rain, Thunder says, hey, JB, great to catch you live. Thank you so very much. Love to see you too. Arif says, Reagan's 12th term. Ooh. Reagan's a nasty man. Nasty man. Ugh. JB, Roger says, JB, you have Danny and Mo. No, there was a miscommunication there. But hopefully I'll get Danny on sometime in the future. We will be having conversations. Danny's a great guy. Nick coming in saying, great show, James. Thank you very much, Nick. I really appreciate it. It's always good to see you in the chat as well. If you want to join the stream, don't be a stranger, brother. Anyway, let's continue. Tobin, thank you so very much for the super sticker. Appreciate it very much. And then James Starks coming in with the super sticker, showing me some love from one James to another. Just gotta love the Jameses. Gotta love them. All right. And then Jacqueline coming in with a super sticker as well. Jacqueline coming in with her English hospitality. Thank you so very much. Appreciated it. Cheers to you. All right. Let's continue on. Yeah, this is true. The EU and the UK won't go against what the US wants. That's absolutely true. They're vassal states, right? This is exactly what they are. And they're basically the United States yes men, right? And so it's like the United States says, oh, we're going to do this. They're like, yeah, we're going to do that. And it's like Germany, Italy, France, Poland, Norway. Do you guys have any intestinal fortitude? Can you guys go in your own way? Aren't you tired of the hegemony and being the lapdog of the United States? UK, are you guys tired? You've got to be tired. Always being, second fiddle to the United States. It's crazy. Oh my goodness. It's just crazy. Pulling the strings says the US puppets are funny. Funny in a sad way. I'll say that. Funny in a very sad way. Aberdeen says you want views like Nick or Sabby, you just need to take a breath and not try to get views. What's that? Okay. Thank you. Let's continue. Grapentine says, is it true that the new president from Mexico just got rid of the ban on GMOs that the last president ordered? I don't know. I have to research that. But if that's true, then that's a good thing. But at the same time, AMLO was moving in not a right direction, but he was moving in a positive direction for the people, especially with like the nationalizing. I think he was trying to nationalize lithium in Mexico. So, I mean, it's almost like the new president, she was given the baton and now she's booking it, and I like it. I like to see it. So Black Ronin says George W. Bush bombed Al Jazeera into becoming another pro-collective West media outlet decades ago. Yeah, this is why we got to be careful with, certain outlets, even if they may seem like they're not Western, they still could have some Western influence. So it says, I love Momodou. He's brilliant and beautiful inside and out. His university tried to expel him for protesting for Palestine, which for him meant deportation only because people organized they had to reverse it. Yeah. And that's the power of organization, people. This is what we try to talk about here on RBN as much as we possibly can. So appreciate it very much. And yeah, B, crunchy peanut butter slaps. It slaps hard. I didn't mean to say it that way. Oh my gosh, what in the world? All right. I shouldn't have said it like that. I'm sorry. I'm gonna head out, guys. Hell no, we ain't leaving. We ain't done yet. What the hell? Sorry. Anyway, let's get into just thanking the patrons really quick, and then we're going to move into the bonus story first, and then we're going to move into the last segment as well. So just want to give a shout out to all the patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, we would not be able to do this work. You guys make this channel absolutely possible. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is I was talking to a friend earlier today, and we were talking about how the religious evangelical right are now starting to, smell themselves now that Trump is getting back into power. And one of the things that I told him was that that this system is built for people like that. This system is built for white supremacy. It's built for capitalism. It's built for imperialism. And one of his questions was, well, what do we do in order to combat that? What do we do in order to change that? And one of the things that I said to him was that we have to build dual power, mutual aid, all these different things. And so I think I left my phone in the kitchen. Anyway, and so that's one of the things that we have to absolutely do. And through doing that, it's not just doing mutual aid is also informative and educational. And that's also a form of mutual aid as well. And so because of that, this is why we do what we do here on RBN. This is why it's important to support independent media. And we can't thank you enough for your support, because you guys help us to be able to not only educate, but inform as much as possible within the imperial core. Because you cannot have revolution without education. You cannot have revolution without accurate information about what the imperial core is doing, so that people learn and then they realize that they can be activated and they can make moves in order to change the system into something that's more egalitarian, equitable, and equal as well. So just thank you to everybody who's been supporting us for the last 3.5, almost 4 years. Because without you guys, we would not be able to do this work that's so vital. So thank you. Thank you. Now, let's get into the next subject that I want to talk about. I do not have a thumbnail for this because I didn't include this in the thumbnail, but this is a bonus story that I wanted to cover. This is going to be heavy, but it's important. I'm going to try not to get overly emotional. I'm going to share a tweet that I found. From Incarceration. I retweeted it earlier today. And if you can guess that I was pissed off, I was. Let me share. Carl Blackburn, 65, long-term unhoused man in Alexandria, Louisiana, was found frozen to death next to a dumpster in Alexandria, Louisiana, on the morning of January 9th. The temperature was 23 degrees. We got money for war. This gentleman was found frozen to death because he was unhoused. What the fuck? Some of these elites wonder why Brian Thompson lost his life. Y'all wonder why. You will cry for a CEO that contributed to the death of thousands of Americans, but you don't cry for the people who are unhoused in this country that die from freezing to death. Your priorities are fucked up. I didn't want to do this story because it hurts. But I have to do this story because who else will do it? Let's get into the article. Don't cry, Jaybe, don't cry. All right. Unhoused Alexandria man dies overnight in freezing conditions. This is him. It says members of the Alexandria community are mourning the death of an unhoused man who passed away in the city overnight. Friends of Carl Blackburn, who is 65 years old, confirmed that his body was found outside sometime between the evening of January 8th and early January 9th. Ann Lowry is the director of CLASS, a nonprofit organization focused on improving the quality of life by promoting access to inclusive education, healthcare, and supportive services. She met Carl about 10 years ago in downtown Alexandria, and the two became good friends. She said, "My friend learned that Carl was found by a dumpster, and he had apparently died during the night of hypothermia. We know how cold it was, and it is unconscionable to me that my friend Carl, this dear man, is dead because no one opens up warming shelters. We can't seem to create the sort of wraparound services we need in the community to support people who are unhoused, whether that is mental health or substance abuse services, or even just how to budget your money. I'm frustrated that your church's doors stay locked and we stay warm inside, but people walk the streets freezing. Temperatures overnight were below freezing in the upper 20s. News Channel 5 reached out to the city of Alexandria for further details surrounding his death. We have not heard back at this time. On January 9th, after Carl's passing, the city did announce the opening of a warming station at the Bolton Avenue Community Center at 315 Bolton Avenue. On this Thursday afternoon, the Louisiana Department of Health confirmed a winter weather-related death in Rapids Parish of a 65-year-old man. They said the death was due to hypothermia and confirmed by the coroner as weather-related. They did not officially release a name. I want to share his photo again. This is why mutual aid is so important. Because if we don't save ourselves, who will? We are constantly being thrown away. This man was out in the streets. Why? Because he was seen as disposable. Because he was not doing, how can I word this correctly? He was not productive enough for them to care about housing him. I think I left my phone in the kitchen. Hang on. I have a message that I want to read from a friend. Hang on. I'm gonna read this from a friend in a comment because what she said was so apropos, and I asked her if I can read this earlier. Shout out to you, Sabiha. Love you, sis. Every human has value, and every human contributes in some way to betterment of humanity. Every single one. The fact that society treats people as disposable and downplays their potential just because they're poor is a loss for all of us. Betterment of humanity isn't measured in profits for the bourgeois. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. This has happened in another city as well. So I'm going to share this too. So this is out of Charleston. And this is another person that has succumbed to a weather-related death in West Virginia. Charleston mayor gives statement on death of an unhoused man. This was posted today. No, I'm sorry, yesterday. It says Charleston Mayor Amy Goodwin released a statement regarding the death of an unhoused man who was found frozen under the Spring Street Bridge Saturday. We are saddened to hear the news that a man has passed away during the cold temperatures. In light of this news, we are reminded of the importance of our community's collective efforts to help ensure the well-being of our most vulnerable community members. Goodwin mentioned that the thresholds for activating cooling and warming centers are set in collaboration with local service providers. The warming center threshold was reportedly increased in 2023. In addition to ensuring resources are focused during extreme cold or heat, our care team and local service providers actively check on and provide support to our most vulnerable community members throughout the year. helping ensure their well-being. So it says an unhoused man was found under the Spring Street Bridge in Charleston early Saturday morning after he reportedly froze to death. According to Man and Meal executive Amy Wolf, the man was a client of the Charleston-based soup kitchen. He was said to have been using warming centers throughout the week to stave off the cold. And Wolf herself says she was only informed of his death Saturday evening. Wolf says she believes that this is the first unhoused person to have frozen to death in Charleston since 2018. There's no word on the identity of the individual at this time. That's somebody's son. That's somebody's sibling. That's somebody's father, cousin, best friend. And I find it interesting how they said, we are reminded of the importance of our community's collective efforts to help ensure the well-being of our most vulnerable community members. And yet every single time I talk about we need housing for all, then some people will decry and say, well, they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. As if anybody else did it on their own. I want to share this tweet. I'm not sharing this just because I want a sob story. I'm sharing this because I want this to activate you. Here's from William Murphy. Shout out to him for this tweet. He says, we live in a society that loves feel-good stories about people coming together to help members of their community that are in need, but scoff at the idea of building a system based on that very same concept. So you want to talk about being a Christian nation, right? That helps your fellow man. But the minute we want to make it systemic as far as helping people to not suffer, then you don't want to do it. You keep your church doors locked. You don't want to let them in. And then when we say, let's just give them all housing, you don't want to do it. 16 million vacant homes in this nation. 16 million. In 2024, homelessness jumped 18.1%. In the year prior, in 2023, homelessness jumped 12%. We went from 580,000 people unhoused in the streets, not talking about people who are sleeping on couches, sleeping in motels, and in shelters. Just in the streets, 580,000. We went from that to 770,000 people. A huge chunk of people who are unhoused in this nation. Even though we make just over 13% of the population, almost 40% of the population of unhoused people are Black. This is unconscionable. This is unsustainable. And so any wonder why we at RBN talk about mutual aid? Any wonder? Because they're human beings. Because we're connected. That's why. Because it means that we have to be compassionate. Don't you dare tell me Oh, you want me to be compassionate for you when you suffer, but you don't want to be compassionate for other human beings. James Woods. And then you want to treat them like they're less than by just giving them tiny houses, basically giving them sheds to live in. Whereas we got these hundreds of thousands of houses that are sitting there vacant, and you don't want to give them that, but you want to put them in a damn shed like they're a fucking animal. Are you kidding me right now? I would be yelling louder, but I don't want to disturb my neighbors. It's ridiculous that this is happening. I want to play this as well because there is an industrial complex that was shared with me. And I appreciate this. Shout out to Roger Meadows and shout out to Larry Sharp for this. This is how it happens. Here's Larry Sharp, who said this on his show, The Sharp Way.
Again, I know New York very well. It's probably wherever you might be. I'm not sure if you're in New York or not, but wherever you are, it's probably similar. People are able to make money off the migrants through the government, right? So one of the reasons why New York City's housing or homeless problem got worse was because there used to be a homeless industrial complex. It still is, but not to the same level. So what would happen is hotels and places like that would take in homeless people, and the state would pay them for it every month, every day, right? X dollars. Well, then hotels said, oh, great. So I'll guarantee have my hotel filled. I got my butt kicked from the lockdowns, so I can make up all this cash by having my hotels filled every night for months on end. And these are homeless people, so they're not going to sue me. They have almost no rights as I see it. So I'm just going to ignore them and give them virtually no services. So I give them no service and I get paid by the government, guaranteed government money, whatever price I want. Damn, done. Well, that was good. And they did it. So that's why they weren't fixing the homeless problem. Why would you? People making money off it, right? So these guys are also making money. They're donating. They pay taxes. Everybody's happy except for the homeless people, right? They're the only ones who are unhappy. Well, now here come the migrants. You go, well, why does that matter? Well, because migrants is federal money. So that tap never shuts off because money printed go burr. So that tap never shuts off. State money eventually shuts off. Federal money never shuts off. And it's more. So I get more money, never shuts off. The Roosevelt Hotel here in New York City, which is right by, believe it or not, it's right by Grand Central Station, used to be like a hotel you'd go to and, you know, when you would come here as a visitor. It's a migrant hotel now. Like, that's it. Why? Well, if me and you go to a hotel, we might like want some service or something, right? And then we might, you know, decide to leave early or something. But why? Migrants, they have even less rights. So we can just ignore them completely. So customer service is nil. Who cares? And the federal government keeps giving me money forever. Why would I solve the migrant problem? Why would I do that? They're all making cash and it's raining and the elites make money. So while I get what you're saying, I'm not saying you're wrong, but there's, again, no incentive to change it. So why would you? No incentive. So, Matthew.
There's no incentive. And how much do some of these people in the nonprofit industrial complex make per year in order to help with the housing of these individuals? They're making six figures. And so a huge chunk of that money for these charities that are donated actually end up going to the people at the top and not actually to the people who need it. So when we talk about changing the system, it also means getting rid of the nonprofit industrial complex by making housing a systemic issue. Because you have to. We cannot sit here and allow this system to continue. It is completely untenable. And you know what the sad part about this is? Is that even in homelessness, there's still a racial disparity, even when it comes to helping the homeless. And the funny part is, not the funny part, the sad part is, I'm not only thinking about the people who are freezing to death here on the East Coast, I'm also thinking about the people who are being burned to death in California, who are unhoused, or who are losing whatever little bit they have in these fires. Because there are people who are unhoused, people who are barely hanging on by a thread, people who are working or working poor, working class, who are losing everything. They're living in their apartments and they have to evacuate because they don't have anywhere else to go either. They don't have second and third homes like some of these celebrities do. And so where do they go? Let me share this. Waiting list to nowhere. Homelessness surveys trap Black men on the streets. Let's go here. It says Maurice Clark huddled in his tent along a dusty railroad tracks as two homeless outreach workers began asking him questions to determine whether he would qualify for free or subsidized housing. Did he use drugs? Has he ever been in jail? How many times has he been to an emergency room? Had he been attacked on the streets? Tried to harm himself? Engaged in sex for money? Clark didn't feel comfortable being honest with the two surveyors he'd never met before, who were flanked by police officers as they recorded his response from a questionnaire on a tablet. He says, I've done some crazy things to survive, but I'm going to say no because there's officers right there. He said, recalling their encounter from a fall afternoon outside of his tent. I'm a Black man in America, so asking this stuff hits a little bit different. National homelessness experts and local leaders say such personal questions exacerbate racial disparities in the ranks of the nation's unhoused, particularly as more people experiencing homelessness compete for scarce taxpayer subsidy housing amid a deepening affordability crisis. Vulnerability questionnaires were created to determine how likely a person is to get sick and die while homeless. And the system has been adopted widely around the country over the past decade to help prioritize who gets housing. Why in the hell are we prioritizing who when in reality we have the resources, we have the housing? Why not just give them the housing? Why do we have to means test who's more? Why do we have to triage who gets housing when in reality we have all the housing we need to house people? That's like having a big, huge banquet table full of food. You have enough to feed everybody, not just first portions, but seconds and thirds. And yet you're still measuring little itty bits and giving them crumbs. Oh, we got to make sure that we can dole this out. And by the time you finish doling out, you still have a banquet full of food and you still have a group of people that are still hungry and starving. Some of them burning up to death because they're having heat strokes in the street, and then some of them freezing to death of hypothermia. It says the more a homeless person is perceived to be vulnerable, the more points they score on a questionnaire and the higher they move in the housing queue. The surveys are being singled out for worsening racial disparities by systematically placing homeless white people at the front of the line, ahead of their Black peers, partly because the scoring awards more points for using healthcare and relies on trust in the system, both of which favor white people. Black people make up 13.7% of the overall US population, yet account for 32.2% of the nation's homeless population. White people, including some of Hispanic descent, make up 7.5% of the make up 75% of the country and represent 55% of America's homeless. It says it's racist in a systemic way. That was from Mark Dons, policy director of the University of California, San Francisco, and lead researcher of the nation's largest studies analyzing Black homeless population. Says if you're a white person, the more likely you are to rank higher if you're a Black person. So if you're more likely to get selected for housing. I want to share this video really quick.
Across the country, it's estimated that more than 653,000 people are homeless. In major cities like Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Austin, Texas, Black people are more likely to become homeless and face extraordinary difficulty getting out of that situation. Black people make up 13.7% of the overall US population, yet a staggering 32.2% of the country's homeless population is Black, according to national statistics. Homelessness experts say the problem is twofold. Circumstances like poverty or joblessness or incarceration are more likely to land Black people into homelessness in the first place. Then it's harder for them to qualify for taxpayer subsidized housing.
As with every system in America, right, there is embedded racism. But it is true that the homelessness response system, like every other system in this country, has embedded racist functions.
One key reason it's so difficult to get this housing is tied to the questionnaire used to rank the perceived vulnerability of homeless people waiting for housing. Questions like, how many times have you used the emergency room? Have you ever engaged in risky behavior like prostitution, sold drugs? The higher a person scores, the higher they move up on the list. But experts say that while these questions can help gauge how likely a person is to get sick and die while homeless, they're less relevant for housing. And such surveys actually favor white people.
There's a lot in how the vulnerability instruments were constructed. The first being that they were normed on a majority white, a majority older population, principally in Boston. And so right away, we see that the concerns that the assessments drive themselves towards are concerns of that population. And there are pretty significant differences.
Research shows that white people are more likely to score higher on these vulnerability assessments and therefore be placed at the top of the queue for available housing. Experts say they tend to score higher because they tend to be sicker, have higher health insurance rates, and are more trusting of the healthcare system. Black people, meanwhile, are more likely to be homeless due to economic hardship tied to being jobless, for example, or having an eviction or prior incarceration. And in response, some communities are now coming up with new questionnaires known as vulnerability assessments in hopes of reducing racial bias in housing. Los Angeles County, for example, is planning to assign more points toward housing for drug use and having HIV, which affects Black men more than any other group. New HIV diagnoses were 8 times higher for Black adults as for white people. In Travis County, Texas, home to Austin and surrounding communities, people who previously lived in gentrified neighborhoods may now move higher on the housing waiting list. It's a county where a Black resident is 6 times as likely to fall into homelessness as a white person. And in Las Vegas, homeless people now score higher if they've been arrested or served time in prison or jail.
We were creating this list to nowhere. This list of 6,000 people that expected housing, because that was the common perception that if I get an assessment done, I'll be on a list for housing.
To read our coverage and learn more about the housing waiting list and how it affects Black people, go to kffhealthnews.org.
So this is also one of the variables a lot of people don't think about. It's the disparities of even when getting help, we're affected more because we're Black. And so it stands to reason why a lot of times when you'll see stories about people who are homeless that are suffering, it's not a guarantee that that person will be Black, but it's harsher on you from time to time if you are also Black. Capitalism and systemic racism are a double whammy when you have more melanin in your skin. I'm not saying this to discount the suffering that white people will have when it comes to things like being unhoused, because it shouldn't happen to them either. This is why I say a housing for all system should be implemented. If you're a human being, you get a house. And I'm not saying a big old house to yourself. No. Like, there are apartment buildings where you have living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, right? You could give that to somebody, right? Just a 1-bedroom apartment. And let's say you have, 100 units. That's 100 homeless people that you take off the streets. And yet we will scoff at that because they're not producing enough. When in reality, we need to switch it. We shouldn't be, you have to produce in order to get a home. No, you get a home so that you can produce. So that you'll get healthy to the point where you'll feel the urge, the need to help produce. We got it flipped. It is ridiculous. Let me I don't know, man. I almost cried this morning reading this story, but I just want to bring it to your attention. If you're not doing mutual aid, I encourage you to start. I encourage you to begin that. And I'm going to tell you right now, as somebody that does mutual aid, it is a bittersweet thing, because it is sweet because when you're doing the work, you feel more connected to your fellow human beings because you're doing the work of sustaining your fellow human beings on this planet. And because it's the right thing to do. But it's bitter because you run out of resources. And there's still so many more people who need help. And so that part hurts. But you never know. The help that you give that very day could extend the life of them just a little bit longer, just until something happens where they're able to be better. And so this is why. And it's not just mutual aid for people who are unhoused. It's mutual aid for people who may be in need, right? Who are housed, who have their own home, who have their own apartment, but they're struggling too. And it's to keep them in that housing so that they don't become unhoused, or to keep them from suffering while they're housed, because some people have that too. And we talk about mutual aid in different ways. Look, are you good at working on cars? Could you donate some of your time to do mutual aid for people who have older vehicles that need those vehicles maintenance or repair? Could you do that? Do you know how? Do you work at a place where they fix tires? Can you donate some tires? Can you donate your time to just go around the neighborhood and go to people's cars, look at their tires and go, hey, look, I know you weren't expecting me, but I have some, used tires that are still really good. I know how, I'm a mechanic and I know how to replace tires. Do you mind if I replace the tires on your car for free, no charge, no questions asked? I just want to help. And then you go out there and you change those tires. Or, or you have if they're not too trusting, you have them come by the shop so you can make sure that everything's balanced and the alignment's right. That's just an idea. I have a comrade that's great with computers. He literally did mutual aid for me and helped, upgrade my computer, which is why I'm able to do streams even better than I can now, than I did before. There's so many of us are good at so many things. Some of us are great when it comes to just having a listening ear and listening to people with their issues. You never know the help that you could possibly do by offering just different basics of mutual aid to help people, even if it's just a listening ear, so that they can vent, so that they don't harm themselves. Mutual aid is a life-saving and a life-sustaining thing. So this is why we not only try to talk the talk, but walk the walk, because we want you to walk with us. These politicians aren't going to do a damn thing for you. I don't care if you're MAGA and you think Donald Trump's going to do something for you. He's not. If you think somebody like a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris is going to do something for you, they're not. I don't care if you think of Ro Khanna. He can come on all the independent media that you think that he wants to. Guess what? Are you better off than you were last year with the progressives? With the Freedom Caucus? Are you better off than you were last year? No amount of a Donald Trump and a J.D. Vance or a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is ever going to actually help us, because they serve the oligarchs. They serve the system that keeps you down. So I wanted to talk about this because I thought it was deeply important for us to get into. Because there's absolutely no reason why people like this should suffer in this system. This could have been my father. Let's reclaim our humanity. Start today. Start right now. Reclaim your humanity. Just go ahead and give a like to the stream. Appreciate it very much. Don't forget to share and subscribe. Let's go to the chat. Let's talk. Gotta give some love to the people, man. Love to all of you guys who watch on a consistent basis, or watch whenever you can, and you guys share information. I just want to say I'm grateful for all y'all. You guys help me be smarter. I appreciate it. Hemkar, thank you so much. Hemkar says, Democracy Now! Al Jazeera News director resigns over modifying Iraq war coverage. That makes sense, Hemkar. Thank you so very much for that. Hemkar is always giving out the receipts. Appreciate you. Let's continue. Thank you very much for this tip on Rockin' Roger. He says, I DM'd a 2-minute video of Larry giving a real life example of how there's more money in treating the symptom than solving the problem. Feel free to play if you like. And yeah, I was able to play that. Thank you so very much for that, Roger. It is more profit in treating the symptom than solving the problem. Because in solving the problem, you cannot make more profit, because once the problem is solved, the profit motive goes away. Let me go to the chat. Black Ronin says, unfortunately, there are people out there who will say that it's his own fault and she should have went to school longer, made better choices in life, or some other usual rightist victim blaming BS. My question is, and this isn't directed at you, Black Ronin. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because you're speaking truth. You're speaking facts here. If we want people to have compassion, why don't we embed that into the system that we live in? I refuse to believe, let me put this down. I refuse to believe that humans are inherently selfish. I say that that is a brain rot and a very subset of human beings. That's not all of us. We're built different. You're built different than some of these people who are multimillionaires and billionaires. You're built different. You're better than them. I don't typically like to use the language of being better, but fuck it. You are better than them. Because your heart hurts seeing people deal with this. You're automatically better. And then it moves you to action. That automatically makes you better than an Elon Musk, a Harlan Crow, a Jeff Bezos, or a Bill Gates. It makes you automatically better. You're better than an Oprah Winfrey. You're better than a Tyler Perry. You're better than a Rihanna. You're better than a Beyonce. You're better than a Jay-Z. You're better than them. Yes, you. Because you're willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that these people are okay, because that's your fellow human beings. You're not willing to exploit people just so that you can have an upper class position in our society. You are better. And it's the majority of us. I refuse to believe that we are just automatically selfish by nature and we won't ever have to help our fellow human beings unless there's some type of financial or materialist incentive. No. That's not human beings. That's not humanity in its historical context. No. That's what cappies like to tell you in order to maintain the system so that they can continue to exploit you. They will tell you that lie. Don't believe them. Because we see it with our own eyes. We feel it in our own hearts. Thank you very much for that, Black Ronin. Appreciate it. Zoya says 15.1 million vacant homes in the United States, and we're letting people die. It costs us $100,000 per year to cage a human. This system is predatory, and they force us to fund it. Who voted for this? Thank you very much. Jacqueline says warming shelters are all very well, but people need forever homes. Warming shelters are just a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. You wouldn't have to worry about warming shelters if we actually just gave people the housing. We don't even need to build affordable housing. This whole affordable housing argument is a BS argument to get us to think that we just don't have enough. No, we have enough. First of all. Second of all, affordable is a subjective term. You can give a house for a penny and say, well, that's affordable. How is that affordable to the person that doesn't have a penny? So the person who doesn't have a penny, they just die? See what I mean? House first, and then watch the people grow. Because once you start to give people housing, guess what? There's a recovery process that happens both mentally, emotionally, and physically. Watch it. And then once that starts to happen, then guess what? They're compelled, I want to do stuff. I actually want to be productive. You know what happens to people who are depressed? You know, one of the questions that people are always asked when they're depressed, they're always asked, well, do you feel unmotivated to actually do things? You just want to be a bump on the log and you just don't want to do anything? I think people who are unhoused feel, just get a job. Kind of hard to do when you're depressed. Oh, JB, you're making excuses for them so that they don't actually do work. You know what? Yeah, I am. Because when you're depressed, you actually don't feel like doing anything. Why? Maybe because you're unhoused. Maybe, just maybe, let's just give them housing so that they get out of the depression, so that then when they finally recover from it, they can actually be productive. Y'all got it so flipped and turned upside down. When in reality, we would actually have a more productive society if we were more egalitarian and just gave people the resources that they needed in order to live. My sentiment is exactly Chicken Pot Pie says, rest in power, King. Absolutely. Guillotine says, hold on, Guillotine. What the hell are you talking about? What are you doing? What are you doing on the stream? See, here's my issue. And this is something that we got to be very careful about on the left. There is a difference between being anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic. Do not let views like this push you into the anti-Semitism route. Because as long as there are people like Lee Camp, Gaijin Girl, Noah Krejcik, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, as long as there are people like Norm Finkelstein, Katie Halper, they are doing the work of fighting against genocide and oppression as Jewish people. They are showing what it means to actually care about your fellow human being. They're not like the Zionists like Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the Zionist. They're not like Joe Biden, the Zionist. They're not like Jonathan Greenblatt, the Zionist. They're not like Kamala Harris or J.D. Vance, Zionists. So here's the thing. This anti-Semitic bullshit that you're spouting right now does not fly here. Leave the stream. Go ahead. Get out. I'm going to say that. Because you're literally insulting some of the comrades that we have who are against genocide that happen to be Jewish. You're insulting them. That don't fly with me. Nah. Who the hell do you think you are? And you're going to play some MAGA while promoting a Zionist? Some people are just fucked up in the head. Anyway, Paul Lozano, sorry, mispronounced the name. I hear how they say client at soup kitchen, same as my mom who worked at one. They all say that. Why not guest? That's just part of this system and how they talk about people. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it's not right. Susan says, I come from a very poor country, but people don't let others, even as strangers, stay homeless there. I rarely see a homeless person. Yeah, and that's the problem with the United States. You're not considered a person unless you produce. Chuck Ruby, thank you very much for the super chat. Says JB, all humans deserve free basic housing and free basic food and free basic clothing and free healthcare and education and a toothbrush and toilet paper, because we are already give all that to criminals in prisons right now. I agree. However, with the provisor, I would say that we still do slave labor in prisons, unfortunately. Just look at the people who are firefighters, the heroes. Some of your heroes in California are incarcerated. Some of those guys are your heroes, saving you. And yet you're willing to keep them in prison, even though they're saving your houses, your property, your lives. I'm not talking to you, Chuck. I'm talking to the people who are who will disparage the people who are incarcerated, and yet these same people who they're disparaging, they're actually saving their asses right now. But yeah, thank you very much for that. Now I want to get to this final segment. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about we risk revolution. And I'm glad that this is going in line with what I was talking about. But let's get to this. Oh, you know what? I forgot to check to see if we have any Rumble rants. Let me check for Rumble rants really quick first. And then, yeah, looks like we're good. Okay. All right. So this is not going to be a very long one, but I do want to touch on this before we head on out. We risk revolution. In the context of what in the context of how this nation has began, we'll talk about revolution and say, well, revolution is actually a good thing in the context of the beginning of this nation. But then you talk about it in the context of now in changing the system, it's spoken about as a negative. So when it talks about the beginning of this nation, we'll talk about revolution as a good thing. When it talk about doing another revolution, it's talk about in a negative context. Why are we talking about this now? Shout out to Case Study QB for this one. This was spoken up on Morning Joe. This is why I say they got a dose of reality. Let's get into this.
Once you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where say above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between 30,000 a year for a household and 50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness. But these individuals have weaponized government, and we risk revolution, whether it's CEOs being murdered in the street, whether it's a Me Too movement that had righteous components of it, or Black Lives Matter. What are these movements? They are targeting the wealthy. we are in the midst of a series of small revolutions to correct income inequality. And the reason we put an insurrectionist and a rapist in office is because for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. Why? Because the majority of households are having the oxygen sucked out of the room, such that a small number of individuals and a small number of companies can be worth more than nation states. Income inequality is out of control. Our tax policy has gone full oligarch.
So, with that being said, I would like to break this down because let me ask you this. Would you have believed me if I told you that what this guy said was allowed on MSNBC 12 to 18 months ago? Would you have believed me if they're allowing this type of rhetoric on MSNBC? I would have laughed at you. I would have said, they're not going to allow somebody to say that. And yet here we are. Let's break it down, shall we? Because I have to say that he made some valid points. Let's start over again.
Once you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where say above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between 30,000 a year for a household and 50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness.
So let's start there because he's talking about happiness factor, right? That's true. This is why I say the accumulation and hoarding of wealth is really a brain rot. It is a sickness of the system. It's a sickness of the capitalist system. And the problem is that capitalism, because some people will say, well, you have an iPhone, so that's capitalism. No. The ability to buy and sell is commerce, right? Capitalism is about who owns what. So basically a small contingent of people or one person owns the means of production. That's what capitalism is. And it relies on constant growth on a planet with finite resources. Therefore, if you're constantly seeking growth, that means you're constantly seeking accumulation of profit, which grows infinitely. This is why people like Elon Musk is on track to become the first trillionaire in our country. That being said, it is a brain rot that is sustained by the system that requires infinite growth. And so your happiness is not different. Whether you have $30 million, $50 million, your happiness factor does not change. Because all of your basic needs are met and then some. But the difference between $30,000 and $50,000 is a massive difference. Because that means that's the difference between not all your needs being met and constantly being behind the eight ball versus more of your needs being met and you're not as behind the eight ball as you used to be, which means that your stress levels are lower, your cortisol levels are lower. You're able to experience actually living a little bit more. And so for a huge contingent, a huge majority of us in this country, we don't have that. And so this is why a lot of us are looking at these people, including the people who this gentleman is talking to. We look at them with disdain. We look at them with scorn because they are literally saying to us that you're just not doing enough. When in reality, we're doing everything in order to make sure that they are able to sit in the seats, the comfortable seats that they're in. Let's continue on just a little bit further.
But these individuals have weaponized government, and we risk revolution, whether it's CEOs being murdered in the street, whether it's a Me Too movement that had righteous components of it, or Black Lives Matter. What are these movements? They are targeting the wealthy. We are in the midst of a series of small revolutions to correct income inequality. And the reason.
So let's stop right there, because they are weaponizing the government against us. So it's the people at the same or higher tax bracket than people like Joe Scarborough. This is why a CEO got murked at the end of 2024. Because it's these same companies that have lobbied, that have bribed our politicians into having a government that serves them and that literally murders us. Let's call it what it is. Murders us for profit. And so when that happens, what do we as the working and poor people do? We rise up. The pitchforks and the torches come out. And then next thing you know, people like Joe Scarborough are going, oh my God, why are they doing this? Because you caused it. You pushed us to this position. You get mad at me for pushing you, but I pushed you, I shoved you because you're stumping on my foot. And if you're stumping on my foot, you don't think I'm not going to push you off? This is what happens. You're harming us. So guess what? Clapbacks are for real, baby. And when the working class clap back, we clap back. Because you're literally allowing a system. You're literally exploiting people for profit. And then when those people get sick and tired of being exploited, then guess what? The guillotines come out. Yep. Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. Anybody want to talk about the French Revolution? Let me continue. Breaking it down.
The reason we put an insurrectionist and a rapist in office is because for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. Why? Because the majority of households are having the oxygen sucked out of the room, such that a small number of individuals and a small number of companies can be worth more than nation states. Income inequality is out of control. Our tax policy has gone full oligarch.
And here's the issue. Some people decided to go with Donald Trump because they're desperate. And don't come in here and say, well, they decided to go with the person who did sexual assault and they're a felon and they're a racist. Here's the thing. These people who were desperate to go with them because that wasn't much of a factor, those of you who voted for Kamala Harris are in the same camp, because for you were desperate to do the same thing for somebody who was committing a genocide. So you're both in the same camp, no matter who you are. Whether you voted for Trump or Kamala, you're both in the exact same camp because you were willing to look the other way of suffering of another people just so that you could have the things that you needed materially. When in reality, both of those people, both of those sides are all on the same side. They just don't want you to know it. And so there's desperation among people. And whether it's going to be a fascist revolution or it's going to be a socialist revolution, a revolution is going to come. The question is it going to be one that's going to be useful for the corporations, or is it going to be one that's going to be useful for the workers, the proletariat, the average working man, woman, person, and child? Now, people like me are working for the latter. because we do not want a system that is conducive and works best for the corporations, because we don't want corporate power to run our system anymore. We need to run this system. But you have people like this that are saying, you are, he said, Molly, you in danger, girl. You in danger. And this is why it is so important for us to continue to build dual power. Now, there are many people who are trying their hardest to go the peaceful route. Peaceful routes, like, for instance, shout out to Roger Meadows when it comes to the route of doing citizen ballot initiatives, right? That's the peaceful route. Trying to do the peaceful route, like, trying to vote for third parties, right? Outside of the duopoly, that's trying to go the peaceful route. Trying to go the peaceful route by doing a general strike, right? That's the peaceful route. But what happens when you exhaust all those? What did JFK say? Those who prevent a peaceful revolution make what inevitable? What happened to Brian Thompson was just the beginning, and it's quite unfortunate. I'm telling you right now, if the elites do not listen, which I trust the snake to be a snake. Yeah. I know. Exactly. So with that being said, it is imperative for us to step away from this system by doing what we can to build dual power. At the same time, it is going to be it is not going to work out. It's not going to work out for the people who are elites. And I'm going to end with this because this is what Jen Psaki said. And we're going to end with this.
I hope we all remember about the outcome of the election. With all due respect to Anand, the American public is not waiting for someone to lead them out of fascism. That is not what the American public sent us a message about. They're waiting for people to listen to them and actually engage with them in their communities about what they want from the government. And so part of the challenge here is continuing to have the conversation in a way that's academic and ivory tower and not what actually people are dealing with. And that, to me, is a big part of the outcome and why Trump connected in a weird way, and why we need to change what we do and not talk about it as leading people out of fascism. That's not what the public is looking for. I hope we all remember about.
With that being said, it's not about leading people out of fascism. It's that the fascists will use it in order to keep people within the system to make them think that they're actually doing better when in reality that they're not. And reality is that we got to just stop listening to these people because they're doing us no good. And this is why I say we got to do it ourselves with building dual power and doing mutual aid. Because they're never going to listen to us as long as this system continues to be around. Anywho, so I'm going to head on out. Thank you so very much to everybody for tuning in. I will be live this Tuesday at 3 p.m. on my channel, so I hope you guys can tune in. And look, thank you so much to everybody, for all your support. We appreciate it. Please make sure that you're still subbed to the channel. You guys make this world go round. Like I always say, do whatever you can to help out your fellow neighbors, especially the most vulnerable among us. And let me go to Rockman, and then we're gone. Roger says mutual aid resources, the fever reduces the fever, but it doesn't relieve you of your virus. It shouldn't be depended upon as a permanent solution. Only when the mutual aiders get together as a community and leverage the lever of government directly via CBIs. Yes, and that is a peaceful way of getting about it. But once that's exhausted, Roger, I'm gonna tell you right now, and I trust the snake to be a snake, and I trust these corporate people, I trust these corporate dictators to continue to be who they are. Once we exhaust those, we got to exhaust them. But once after we do that, yeah. But yes, thank you so very much to everybody. You guys take care. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Do all the things if you got them. Mwah, forehead kisses. I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.